From the heart of Central Florida, you're listening to the most electrifying show in media. A Neighbor's Choice. And I'm your host, your neighbor, David Gronowski. So glad to be with you again for another live journey through the news together. And that's what we're going to do because we're guided by principles. We're not going to get into the groupthink nonsense, the tribalism that governs so much of political discourse in the media today. And so if you want to be a part of the show, there's multiple ways you can. You can write a comment in our live stream. Just look up our Rumble, A Neighbor's Choice. Search for A Neighbor's Choice on Rumble. You can watch the live stream there. Or you can listen to the audio stream on aneighborschoice.com. Also email us, hello@aneighborschoice.com, if you would like to participate via email with a question or a guest suggestion or comment. And I saw this clip from, CNBC, where Trump's FDA commissioner, Scott Gottlieb, so he was the FDA commissioner that was overseeing the approval of Pfizer's product that's now supposed to be tied to your very existence around the country and your job, your ability to put food in your mouth and your family. And he's over there. Now he helped approve their product, didn't use 10 to 15 years, didn't do tests on pregnant women and other types of issues to look at stuff. But he put that little thing through, and guess where he's at? He's working for Pfizer now. You never saw that coming? It always happens that way. That's the exact name of the game. You know, the pharmaceutical companies, they staff the FDA, and you're either a previous pharmaceutical company employee or a future one, depending on what you do when you go to the FDA. And now he was on CNBC saying that perhaps we're going to need 3 or 4 doses of the product in order for it to really work. So, he was truly an objective arbiter of science, wasn't he? And of course, if the McWoke left wasn't so lockstep into pushing what the TV tells them to push, that you have to take these products or else you're not allowed to be a human being, they would say, hey, wait a second, Orange Man Bad appointed him, therefore I'm scared, that's messed up. But they can't see that because it doesn't fit their little narrative. But just like that, if anything goes bad with these products, the media can turn on that narrative and they'll say, well, they were pushed through fast because of Orange Man Bad, and his FDA commissioner is so, seedy because he went off and worked for Pfizer right after, he was supposed to be the independent third-party decider for these products' efficacy and safety. But because that's not the thing that they've been Pavlovian conditioned to do today, you're not going to see any criticism of this incestuous relationship between their supposed third-party deciders for quality and safety and the companies they're supposed to be watching. Absolutely outrageous, the incestuous relationship between big government and big business. And the left used to say they cared about it. And some, the intelligent, the true left, progressives and so forth, just a few of them are speaking out about the obvious BS behind this relationship between big government and big pharma, but not enough. Luckily, I guess some states are taking some, pushback against, putting a little bit of pushback against the heavy-handed approach of one-size-fits-all medicine. That Dr. Pierre Corey, we've had him on the show. He's the ICU doctor, head of the Frontline Critical Care Group. He has a quote talking about this statement issued by the Texas State Medical Board. The Texas State Medical and Pharmacy Boards issued a statement reminding doctors and pharmacists that it is perfectly appropriate to practice medicine the old way, i.e. using clinical judgment and expertise versus following edicts from the captured FDA, NIH, CDC. So that's something to be happy about. That, and again, this time I've never seen more interest and more value demonstrated every day in the headlines for why we don't have a national government, but rather a federal government where most of the decision-making power is to be left to the people in the states. Because this is more important than ever to preserve that kind of situation for power, so that we don't have these one-size-fits-all edicts for 330 million people to have to be commanded to do certain things or take certain things or not take other things and so forth and so on. That's not market medicine. That's dictatorial medicine, and that's not scientific. It's not conducive for an ethical society. And unfortunately, that's just the way this system has been for a long time. And it's just, we're going to have to wake up to it, and the whole world's going to have to wake up to that and get into a state of true reform. I was telling you that, you get a couple little loud people that want to squawk and try to attack our show just for talking about the facts. And let me remind you, I've never told you what you should or should not take for any of this stuff. That's not my job. I'm not interested in that. I'm not a nanny state person. I don't like telling people what to do, unlike the McWoke left. I've always tried to present the arguments from both sides, allow you to make the decision, look at the facts. We don't like mandates, but just because we don't like mandated medicine doesn't mean we're telling you what to do about the particular medicine that they want to mandate on you. That's up for you to decide in the research that you do. But that's not enough for people who have a political fascist, meaning they like to use force for the benefit of big government and big business. People who have fascist ideology, they don't want you to just say, you do you and you take care of you and here's this and here's that. They want one size fits all. They don't want any media dissent. They don't want any voices of other scientists with impeccable credentials presented. So by me merely mentioning the fact that there are doctors who have other solutions and other protocols and early treatments that they've been using all over the world, with millions of people using them all over the world, they don't want you to know that that exists. That's how low resolution a lot of people's minds are when they get caught up in fascist type groupthink. And I saw a comment from one of them saying, from one of those people who claims to be a scientist, saying, do you know what happened to Purdue Pharmaceutical over the opioid crisis? Billions of dollars of payments for hiding the addictive quality of opioids for the love of money. And I looked at that and I thought to myself, these people are truly clueless. So this person's argument basically is, by me presenting the fact that some doctors have enough courage to buck big pharma's control over the media and our government agencies and treat patients with things that work, that are generic, that cost no money, that are off patent, which means they have no big, giant profit margin. Those are the people who are supposed to be associated with Purdue Pharma. It's the exact opposite. It's an embarrassment that these people are so ignorant. Because if just to remind folks, it was Purdue Pharma that did the opioid, the oxycodone, Oxycontin, right? And Purdue Pharma, they made billions of dollars, but you know how they got that through? They got that through because of the FDA. So these people are mad at us for challenging the obvious quack nonsense that the FDA has pushed. They just pushed that Alzheimer drug that had no basis to be pushed as a product to give people. They just rammed it through. And their own people were protesting because of how outrageous that is. That doesn't mean everybody at the FDA. I've never said everybody at the FDA is, on the same wavelength. But the institution as a whole has a track record of pushing things through, rubber stamping things for approval that shouldn't have been approved. Purdue Pharma is a perfect example of that. So let me try to explain these guys say that they're scientists, some of the folks who want to go and regurgitate one size fits all medicine. Oh, I'm for the science. Okay. So you're for science, and you're saying that Purdue Pharma's pushing of opioids is somehow an example of why we should listen to the same FDA that approved Purdue Pharma's oxycodone opioids. We should listen to them now. That is so stupid, right? That's the exact opposite of any basic level of cognitive processing here. It is Purdue Pharma that it was the FDA that approved these oxycodones. Let me remind you, here's the story from May 13, 2021. FDA highly culpable for opioid crisis, says Empire of Pain author. Nearly 500,000 people have died from an opioid overdose involving either prescription or illicit drugs. On average, 38 people die every day in 2019 from prescription opioid overdoses, amounting to more than 14,000 deaths. But the article goes on to say, this is Yahoo, the FDA is highly culpable, Patrick Radham Keefe told Yahoo Finance. Keefe is the author of the recent published book, Empire of Pain, which explores the history of the Sackler dynasty. That's the billionaires behind the oxycodone epidemic. In 1995, the FDA approved OxyContin, the highly addictive painkiller, which Purdue Pharma then marketed and sold. Purdue has twice admitted to illegally marketing OxyContin in 2007 and 2020 plea deals with the U.S. Department of Justice. In Empire of Pain, Keefe details the FDA's role in enabling Purdue Pharma to cash in on OxyContin. When Purdue Pharma was originally submitting OxyContin for approval by the FDA, the top official at the FDA in charge of approving the drug for sale, but also of approving the way in which it could be marketed, was a guy named Curtis Wright, Keefe said. OxyContin turned out to be a blockbuster drug, bringing in over $30 billion in revenue from sales for Purdue, according to the House Committee on Oversight and Reform. Curtis Wright ended up leaving the FDA and took a job at Purdue Pharma about a year after the drug's 1995 approval. Do you see that? So just like Scott Gottlieb approved the rushed products that Orange Man Bad made, and I'm saying that because that's the way the media framed it when he was going to get the credit for the vaccines. Then when they got their guy in by fortifying the election, as they called it in Time Magazine, what do we get? Oh, these things are perfectly fine. And in fact, you are less than human if you do not take them and get all the boosters indefinitely like we tell you to. But the same guy, again, that Trump put in there, Scott Gottlieb, he goes off to Pfizer after he approves it. Now he's pushing that we need to get 3 or 4 of the doses in order for it to really kick in. And that's the only thing that he will allow to be talked about as a solution. Nothing that's a generic drug. That's a nonprofit drug if we do generics. Well, guess what? OxyContin, same deal. Curtis Wright was the guy in charge of approving OxyContin. He was the guy in charge of how it could be marketed and how they put in a slip basically saying that it's not addictive. Don't worry about it. That's what led to the opioid crisis. 500,000 people dying. And Curtis Wright was the guy at the FDA in charge of OxyContin being pushed. And then when he left it, he got a big gig as an executive at Purdue Pharma. Just like Scott Gottlieb was FDA commissioner for the Pfizer product, and then he goes and works for it right afterwards, making lots of money as an executive. So back to the Purdue Pharma. He ends up taking a job at Purdue Pharma, the company that makes the drug that he's just approved for roughly 3 times his government salary. I think his starting compensation was somewhere in the neighborhood of $400,000. That's not a suitcase full of money getting slid under a table, but it raises questions in my mind about corruption, conflicts of interest, and how much we can trust the judgment of the FDA in having given such a green light to Purdue Pharma early on. This is ridiculous. This is what we call deep capture, when government agencies are completely consumed and owned by the agencies, by the companies they're supposed to be independent referees for. But how come the left can write that story in Yahoo Finance? The guy's probably a left guy or whatever, but they can't seem to apply the same basic low. It's so easy to have this kind of level of cognition. This is basic wisdom. If the same thing is in play for that. Oxycontin, 500,000 people dead, getting hooked on something they didn't need. And then they go and get a revolving door. The guy that approves it at the FDA goes and gets a sweet deal with Purdue Pharma after he approves their drug, getting people, 500,000 people dead. And what was it doing? Managing symptoms, by the way. Chronic pain, as we've discussed on this program, Professor Bruce Hammock of UC Davis and his team showed in their studies, peer-reviewed papers, that these consumption of omega-6 and all these different PUFA vegetable oil type fats, they bioaccumulate, and they are creating the pathway that caused this chronic pain problem that gives the opioid crisis its ability to take off. Because they have so much chronic pain, because they listen to their government and they eat these vegetable oils, or we call them seed oils, that are in so many foods because our government subsidizes them and recommends them in their nutrition guidelines. So they cause the problem. Everybody gets pain, chronic pain. Then they push this garbage drug onto people, say it's fine, it's safe, it won't be addictive. And then the guy that did the rubber stamp goes and gets a job with Purdue Pharma. And these silly, foolish people who want to challenge us for pointing out that scientists and doctors are using generic drugs that contradict the new biggest patent products that the FDA and everybody's telling us we must take or else. And we're not allowed to say, wait a second, Scott Gottlieb, he approved it. Now he's with Pfizer as an executive marketer. And then the other guy was the FDA commissioner before him. He went off with Moderna, with their company that financed them. So this is ridiculous. This is such an embarrassment to science. This is such an embarrassment to ethics. And we all are going to have to talk about this continually until this gets stopped. I'm David Granosky, back in just a moment, live on A Neighbor's Choice.
A lawsuit is not something that anyone looks forward to. It's a stressful process. There are attorneys in Tampa Bay that keep clients well informed, creating less stress. That law firm is Catania. Personal injury law is defended with full disclosure. There is no guessing game. If it's an auto accident, medical malpractice, nursing home negligence, unsafe working conditions, or motorcycle accidents, the law firm of Catania will handle the process worry-free from start to finish. Many victims don't realize they have a claim for the loss until they talk to Catania. They only represent private individuals and treat every case as if it's going to trial. Putting families first is more than just a slogan. It's their way of practicing law. It's a commitment to you. Remember, they don't get paid if you don't get paid. So go to Catania.com. Over 28 years in practice. Catania, personal injury, auto, and motorcycle accident attorneys. Catania, putting families first.
Office Tampa. Not attorney spokeswoman.
David Granosky here. Let me tell you about a man named Gabriel. Every day, Gabriel puts on his boots and drives across America to make sure our store shelves stay stocked with the food people count on. See, Gabriel served our country overseas. He knows that America stands for freedom, quality, and caring for others the way we would like to be treated. That's why when Gabriel saw food shelves getting low during the pandemic, he hit the road as a driver with Oakley Transport. In the land of the free, where no one should go hungry, we need heroes like Gabriel to help keep America fed. CDLA driving professionals. Join Oakley Transport today. Keep America fed. Visit oakleytransport.com or call them today at 1-877-8-TANKER. That's 1-877-8-TANKER. So I want to make this clear for folks who get gaslit by this garbage, corrupt media and the corrupt government agencies that politicize everything. It's shameful, totally unethical, totally ignorant and harmful. They're pushing crank nonsense. They want you to believe that the only thing that can ever help you whenever there's a disease, not just this pandemic, any disease, the only things that can help you are their extremely expensive products that are expensive because they maintain a patent. And drugs that are expired off of their patent, they don't have any margin. It's basically dead to the industry. They can't support their staff and their infrastructure and their overhead and all the costs of marketing and all the lobbying they do is very expensive when they can't patent something and push it out and then reap all the billions of dollars to recoup. So their entire model is blinded to anything being a true breakthrough solution that's a generic thing or a naturally occurring substance like vitamins or minerals, or things like dietary changes, getting vegetable oils out of your life to stop inflammation. They won't push that. Pfizer will never in a million years ever push that because that's not their business model. That's like asking a car company to push, selling books or something. It's not their framework. They don't think that way. I'm being charitable here. You know what I mean? I'm trying to explain this in the way that is as logical without all the extra layers of political analysis we could provide and ethical analysis. But for people to try to gaslight you and tell you, oh, the only thing that's ever scientifically valid is that which is a patented product. That's what they're saying. And they say, oh, we're just following the science. Well, why is it that your fake Mick science always results in only things that are patented being the thing that you're supposed to take for a disease? And they can't tell you that because they're full of it. They don't know what they're talking about, these people who regurgitate this nonsense, that they're on the side of science. They're not on the side of science. They're on the side of corruption, and they don't know it. They're useful idiots. Dr. Corey has a quote talking about this story in Huffington Post called the whitewashing AIDS history. In 1987, the NIH and Fauci refused to adopt the repurposed drug Bactrim, despite frontline doctors' advocacy in the AIDS epidemic. Thousands of patients died unnecessarily until the evidence of efficacy won out. History repeats with you-know-what drug and COVID. See how this works? Dr. Relman, former editor of New England Journal of Medicine in 2002, said, doctors are being bought by pharma, not only in the practice of medicine, but in teaching and research. The academic institutions of this country are allowing themselves to be paid agents of the pharmaceutical industry. It's disgraceful. That's Dr. Relman, former editor of the prestigious New England Journal of Medicine, 2002. How about another former editor of the New England Journal of Medicine, Dr. Engel? It is no longer possible to believe much of the research that is published or rely on the judgment of trusted physicians or authoritative guidelines. I take no pleasure in this conclusion, reached reluctantly over 2 decades as an editor. That's in 2009, he said that. Dr. Angel, also, he's the editor of the New England Journal of Medicine, 2009 said that. This is a big deal, folks, and I'm glad that so many people, more than ever before in probably world history, are waking up to a sad reality of a lot of deep, deep capture and corruption, which is distorting our ability to get accurate solutions and life-saving solutions properly studied and properly delivered to people. So let's talk about profits in medicine. These people have opened up a can of worms. Back in a moment.
If you're not scared of COVID,
they are waiting for hours.
Dangerous and life-threatening.
The Afghan withdrawal.
You should wear a mask. It's a crazy world.
Delta variant surges.
The Taliban says
we are going to see flooding
coming across our border. History will be watching.
Frustrated and scared.
Deeply saddened by the facts.
It's our national security.
What's coming next?
When you have people indoors, but we are here to help you survive it. News Talk 1040. WHBO.
Greg Abbott being criticized for his state's strict new abortion law, which bans abortion after 6 weeks or when a heartbeat is detected. The governor now under fire after his response to a question yesterday about victims of rape and incest.
Texas Governor Greg Abbott on why he won't allow a rape exception in his state's new abortion bill
is to eliminate rape so that no woman, no person
will be a victim of rape.
White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki's response?
Well, if Governor Abbott has a means of eliminating all rapists or all rape from the United States, then there'd be bipartisan support for that.
The Justice Department deciding how it can challenge the law. Andy Field, ABC News, Washington.
According to FBI crime statistics, Texas is the 15th most dangerous state in the nation when it comes to the number of rapes that occur. The World Health Organization calling for a moratorium on booster shots, saying 80% of the global COVID vaccines have been administered in high to middle-income countries so far. Michelle Franzen, ABC News.
News Talk 1040, Tampa Bay weather forecast.
Good afternoon. I'm meteorologist Alan Archer at your News Talk 1040 WHBO Weather Center, where a weak storm center in the Central Gulf moves up into the Panhandle tonight. It's affording us a 60% chance of afternoon thunder showers in from the southwest. Cloudy at 89, 45% tonight at 77. Back to a cloudy 60% anytime day thunder shower tomorrow at the high of 84. Thunder showers into Friday as well. I'm meteorologist Alan Archer, News Talk 1040 WHBO.
Who is your neighbor? Dave and Wally are team drivers for Oakley Transport. One day, they came across a very serious accident on the highway. Some might pass on by, but Dave and Wally saw there was no time to waste. They jumped into action and saved 2 people's lives with moments to spare. That's the kind of courageous love we need more of today. It reflects the respected culture Oakley Transport develops with their driving professionals. CDLA licensed drivers. Join Oakley Transport today for a rewarding career. Visit oakleytransport.com. That's oakleytransport.com. So the products that they're trying to mandate that people have to take, their own marketing guy, Scott Gottlieb, who was the crony guy they put in there when he was the FDA commissioner under Trump, he approved the products, and now he's saying you need 3 or 4 of these things. So that means if you don't get your at least 4 as your Pfizer executive has commanded you, then you're anti-vax, by the way. That's what that means. Because that's how they're going to play this thing, and that's how they're going to consider you to be fully vaxxed is whatever you've had your latest booster. Again, we don't know what they have not been studied to find out the long-term effects of doing these kinds of things, these kind of products, never been done before. This is the Moderna side of things. This is their first product they've ever had to market and a drug. And then people who point out that scientists and doctors have been using things that are generic, which means they're nonprofit, they get accused of being the bad guy. It's so upside down, but people are just owned by groupthink and they're terrified to think for themselves. That's why it's so important, by the way, as a take-home lesson in this time, to make sure your children have opportunities to play and really play. Don't stick them in front of a TV or a smartphone or YouTube on autoplay. How stupid is that? What a waste. Because you see that when kids these days, they grow up, they don't even know how to have an imagination. They don't even know how to pretend, make believe, right? To pretend they're in a battle or pretend that they're chasing dinosaurs. They don't know how to do that anymore because they've never had to stop and actually fill in something and create a world in their head. They've been parked in front of TVs and movies and Netflix and YouTube autoplay that's filled in all the information for them. They've never had to actually stop and make their own music or in their head create their own song or their own melody or their own, hide and seek imagination against animals or things that they could imagine in another world. And that's so important to allow our kids to have those times and not just little 10-minute windows once a week. No, but hours of play is so important. Because you can see the effects of what happens to a society that does not have a cultivated imagination. If you don't have a cultivated, independent imagination, you don't know how to think except for what is put into you through stimulus from the TV. That's why people look like walking jokes all around us. They say they're for the science, and then when you point to them the science behind azithromycin or the science behind these different products, they don't want to look at it because the TV didn't say it. Therefore, they can't even use any creativity to think independently. They're completely dependent on the hive mind. Completely, 100% dependent on the hive mind. And so when you try to stop that and say, hey, look at the science. And you try to use their own arguments for them. Like I said, one of the people attacking me, very few people, massive, overwhelming positivity. But you're always going to get people who stumble upon your show who get triggered and obsessed with trying to support only what government dictates tell you to do. And they can't for the life of them, because perhaps they've never had a proper understanding of history. They can't imagine that they're falling into the same trap of being a book burner. The book burners and the banners of information, they never end up looking good in history. But they can't imagine that. They can't have the imaginative faculty in their mind to be able to step back and say, it sure feels like I'm right, but maybe if I'm the team that wants to burn books and ban and delete voices and real scientists, and I'm the one that wants to clear the field for giant corporations to only mandate patented products as the one-size-fits-all solution that every person over every age must take or they're not allowed to be a human. If I'm that person, I'm on the villain team of history. All history has shown those are the villains. Those are the villains. There's no story in history where the people who are pushing the suppression of scientific dissent and saying science is only about what the majority says. That is the antithesis of science. That is Luddite fascism. And the fact that people are so brainwashed that they can't even see that when it's happening is mind-blowing. And you see there's a lot of hatred in people's hearts for this. They hate it that people don't want to go along with the Borg. And they think that they're different from the superstitious mimetic groupthink and scapegoating witch hunt mobs of the past. They're in the same boat. And they get angrier and angrier the longer people hold out from submitting to the hive mind, dictate of the crowd. We all know these quotes that we remember from our childhood. Ralph Waldo Emerson said, "To be yourself in a world that is constantly trying to make you something else is the greatest accomplishment." And people who put on 16 masks a day on their kids to ride in the car alone can't seem to understand that indicts what they're doing. And I understand that. Look, I get that there's groupthink silliness on the side of the factions or whatever that are against the mandates unlocked. I know that there are ways in which it becomes kind of an identity cult to just do the opposite. That's still mimetic in some ways. But they're not the same. They're not on the same equal footing. One side has all of the giant corporations and all of the giant media and the government agencies, all deeply captured by the big pharma companies, all pushing one-size-fits-all coercive medicine. So when you read a quote like, "To be yourself in a world that is constantly trying to make you something else is the greatest accomplishment," and that has everything to do with your bodily integrity. It's your bodily, sovereignty that's at stake here. And people, it's hard for them to lose their devotion to the transcendence that they feel when they're a part of a tribe that feels righteously indignant. And all of human history has been a sad story, not always sad, but oftentimes it's been littered with sad stories of societies that say we have the majority, therefore we have the power to hurt those who think differently from our rituals and our behavior patterns and our rites of passage. And it is a rite of passage that they're trying to implement, that people have to take products that haven't been studied for long-term safety and quality and efficacy. It is a very big, aggressive. It doesn't matter if it was Flintstone vitamins, but the fact that it's stuff that hasn't been tested long-term and they want to mandate that as your access to life is insanity of the highest order. And so many of them are so viciously and angry about it precisely because, one, the irresponsibility of the fringe crank media on TV that's constantly pushing out pseudoscience hysteria. That's got them in a tizzy and emotionally abused. And number two, they feel scared that maybe they rushed into something that they didn't need or may not work as well as the evidence continues to show. And so every time a large percentage, close to half the population, refuses to go along with, the double deal and everything like they did, it reminds them that maybe I shouldn't have done this. And so they get angrier and angrier and angrier the longer they hear that people outside of their collective choice persist in doing something else because they're scared. When you deal with questions about life or death, it scares the heck out of people. And even though the evidence shows that people, the CDC and everything reported, people who get these products, they can transmit it and spread it just as much. Right? But somehow that goes in their ear and out the other, and they can't seem to process that because it's more delightful to scapegoat and hate somebody than it is to deal with science. That's why Christianity is what brought in the birth of the scientific method, which allowed us to stop scapegoating people. We're going back to pre-Christian times and times even in our recent past that were Christian influenced but still not following Christ, where we're going to start looking for scapegoats instead of looking for solutions. And that's a sad, sad reality. And it's all because people don't have the intellectual humility to recognize that maybe they bought into something that was wrong. And because they're so scared and because they're so desirous to fit in and feel like they're on the right team, they can't stop and make real critical course corrections. As Mark Twain said, it's easier to fool people than to convince them that they have been fooled. And that's where we're at today. A lot of people got fooled into believing that Afghanistan was going to be some kind of social justice warrior utopia. They really believed that nonsense. And if we were to question them, they'd say, you should shut that channel down or shut that show off because they question the experts like Mark Milley, who reads, books about Foucault theory and thinks that with another $1 trillion for his contract friends that he'll go and work for after he retires, maybe we can get them to be social justice warriors in Afghanistan. So because I contradict those so-called experts, there's a lot of fascist minds on the left that, and today's left, which isn't left, there's nothing left of the left, it's just liberal corporatists now. They're so sad where they've gone. They would say, delete him, shut him down. He's saying that we should not go and do another $1 trillion of nation building to try to get Afghanistan to be social justice warriors. He's not an expert. Do you see Mark Milley's uniform? He can speak. Don't let anybody speak other than, the people that approve what he says. That's the fascist mindset. And it totally infected into the, modern McWoke left discourse. And if I were to criticize Alan Greenspan back when the housing market, or Bernanke and so forth, when the housing market was going up, and they said, oh, don't worry about it. No bubble here, no bubble here. If I were to criticize it, they'd say, no, you can't speak. Delete his account. Shut down his show. Because if he says that there's a market correction, there's a boom, that this is a bubble that's going to bust, and people are going to lose their life career savings and lose their homes, he's not an expert. Otherwise, he'd be in the Federal Reserve chairman spot, and you're not. So you don't get to speak. Where's your degree in economics? See how this works? Or how about if I was a critic when the FDA approved OxyContin and they put in that insert that said on behalf of Purdue Pharma, hey, this won't be addictive to you. Don't worry about it. Have at it. 500,000 people die of opioid addiction stirred by this. The guy who approved it goes on to become an executive, making $400,000 as a starting pay at Purdue Pharma after he rubber stamped this garbage product into your body. If I was to be a radio host in 97, when FDA, your guardian of your body, your guardian of your family's health, told you, we're going to put an insert that says OxyContin is perfectly safe. Don't worry, no addictive qualities. Have at it. If I were to be a radio host back then in 97 and say, hey, maybe don't take this for your pain problem. The same guys trying to shut us down now would be saying back then, if they were in the mindset that they are in now, they'd be saying, shut them off, take them off radio, take them off podcast, take them off the internet. Don't let them criticize what the FDA has decreed from on high. There's nothing to see here. If you say that the FDA is corrupt and saying OxyContin is safe, don't worry about it, it's not addictive, well, you're a conspiracy theorist. Where'd you get that word from? Who told you that? Who told you to say that word? But they can't think. They don't have self-awareness, apparently. They don't know how to step back and look at what they're saying and see, wait a second, what am I doing here? I'm on the wrong side of history. They don't have that foresight, that insight. Apparently, they don't want to look at it. Maybe they do, but they've just clouded their mind so much. But do you see how this works? History is not written by the people who burn books and delete and attack people and tell people you're not allowed to talk about other scientists and doctors and what they're doing around the world to treat people with products that big pharma companies like Pfizer and Purdue want you to not know about. History is written by the people who speak out for humanity, speak out for freedom, speak out for scientific debate, and don't care about the pressure to conform to the sea of lies. I'm David Gronowski. We'll take a break and return live on A Neighbor's Choice. Who is your neighbor? Dave and Wally are team drivers for Oakley Transport. One day, they came across a very serious accident on the highway. Some might pass on by, but Dave and Wally saw there was no time to waste. They jumped into action and saved 2 people's lives with moments to spare. That's the kind of courageous love we need more of today. It reflects the respected culture Oakley Transport develops with their driving professionals. CDLA licensed drivers. Join Oakley Transport today for a rewarding career. Visit oakleytransport.com. That's oakleytransport.com. Hello, David Gronowski here. You're listening to A Neighbor's Choice. You can call in at 727-587-1040. That's 727-587-1040. If you'd like to join the show with any questions, you can call in at 727-587-1040. George, on our comment stream, comments, Australian Prime Minister said unvaccinated people will be locked out, that there will be an economy of the vaccinated. What do you think about this? Are the Australians just a different kind of people, or is that part of a plan? Is the rest of the Davos world going to follow this path? I'm sure a lot of those folks that like to treat people like cattle and see normal people as, basically cattle, possession, property, a lot of them would love to do what they're doing in Australia. And Fauci has said he loves the way Australia has done their policies. Fauci's the guy that lied to Congress. Senator Rand Paul has referred him to the DOJ for criminal investigation for his group funding the lab research that led to this outbreak. But I'm sure he would love, he said so in the interviews, that he'd love to do what they're doing in Australia. We are not allowed to be a part of society. How sad is that? Do you want to live in that kind of a world for your kids? That's miserable. Why are people so filled with hate and ignorance that they want this kind of forceful, hateful stuff? This is the opposite of where we want to go. They're going to want to mandate any kind of medicine. You know, we are seeing people get off of their traditional big pharma medications for diabetes using dietary changes and lifestyle changes. And if these punks have their way on this disease, they'll mandate that you can't make certain changes to your diet that are saving people from having horrible diabetic experiences. They're going to try to force that out if they get away with this. Or how about people who are having breakthroughs in heart disease treatment because they're getting away from big pharma's side effect obsessed, symptom reducing framework, and they're actually getting back to the science and finding dietary changes and lifestyle changes can address a lot of the heart problems. One size fits all medical fascism would stamp that out too, and has, by the way, but will get even more aggressively so. What about people who, like Dr. Michael Lasanti, who's using azithromycin and doxycycline? These are generic antibiotics. They have many properties. He put out a British Medical Journal post saying you guys need to use this as a prophylaxis in the pandemic. Fell on deaf ears. Why? Didn't have any big billion-dollar lobby because it's a generic drug. It's in the public domain. It has no money behind it. There's no money to gain from that. But he was a courageous scientist with 39,000 citations to his name, and he pushed it out there, and we pushed it out with him. His call to action. But he's also done research using cheap antibiotics to kill off cancer, to stop metastasis of cancer. If that caught on into the mainstream, you'd see all kinds of negative hit pieces from these same usual suspects who get so much of their advertising dollars from these pharmaceutical companies whose only model is create a new patentable product. That's the only way you can get any kind of so-called the science to back you, that quack, nonsense, fraudulent form of science. I'm telling you, what I've told you on this show about the scientists who are using breakthrough scientific research to kill cancer metastasis with antibiotics, if that caught on where, millions of people were seeing that like they have with this new pandemic and the generics they're using for that, I promise you 100% CNN and NPR and Bloomberg and FDA and Scott Gottlieb and all the other little hacks would be running out telling you, oh, don't worry, this will destroy you. Antibiotics are dangerous compared to chemo, radiation, and surgery, and stupid lemmings would buy it. And they would tell you, I am doing this for the science. I am doing this for the science. You'd be like, no, stupid, you're not. You're a useless idiot. And we got to use direct language like that because they're hurting people. And they won't stop. They're nonsense. One side wants freedom. The other side wants to impose its will on people. And they're doing it in ignorance. Because again, if their media CNN told them, Dr. Michael Lasanti's breakthrough research on antibiotics is not safe. It is dangerous. Antibiotics are more dangerous than chemo, surgery, and radiation for cancer. Those same stupid people attacking you now about this product or that product for this pandemic would be like a robot Borg turned on against antibiotics for cancer treatment. That's the reality of human nature where we're at. It's sad. But that's real. That's what humans do. And they silence voices like mine who don't care about the attaboys. They don't care about the social status, clout chasing crap of fitting in or fitting into the, generic, soulless discourse of TV. And just want to tell their neighbors, hey, this is your freedom. Fight for it. This is your body. Take care of it. This is the scientific papers out there. They're not pushed by NPR and CNN who rely on all these government, all these government voices on their show and all these pharmaceutical dollars and donations. This is just what's going on. They can't handle that. Scott says, Emerson rules. The transcendentalists saw all this coming before the U.S. had coast-to-coast railroads. Social media has literally rewired the reward systems of individuals across societies. Mass regression has ensued. Go figure. I agree with that, but I also think, ironically, though, that the social media has allowed people to break through a lot of this nonsense media manipulation from the TV channels and newspapers that used to be more effective, right? I mean, we see their lies about wars fall apart in real time. We see their lies about hate crime hoaxes fall apart in real time. We see their lies about all kinds of stuff fall apart in real time. And social media kind of helps with that. But it's true that the companies that have been the designated ghettos for sealing off social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Google, they have certainly incentivized really toxic, habits that have affected people's minds. So, it's a tough time to be, seeing all this stuff. And it's a scary time for people who love their families and children. And again, I've told you before, the people who want medical fascism, who think having mandated boosters to get into society, some of them, millions of them believe they're doing it for their family's well-being too. But they don't. The problem is that they've taken a shortcut to heaven that leads to hell. And that is to believe that it's ever okay to use force and violence to coerce people to do what you think is right. This hour, I've really laid out for you example after example of the corrupt reality of our government agencies and pharmaceutical companies. You don't do that if you want to be a guy who gets syndicated on nationwide radio. You do that, I believe, if you're a person with curiosity, when a person with a mind that has empathy, and you want to follow the truth wherever it goes, and you want to tell people about it when you see it. And the truth is that liberty is priceless. And once it's gone, it's hard to get it back. And once people believe and become fooled to the point where they hate their own liberty and they hate their own neighbor so much that they do anything to move heaven and earth to hurt them and to subdue them, you're dealing with reprobate minds. And the only solution for that is repentance. Our nation needs to repent. We need to repent of our addiction to violence. We need to repent of our addiction to collectivism. We need to repent of our addiction to believing that DC alone can save us with our health cares and all these different debates that we have. We need to humble ourselves and repent. Turn away from our wickedness. Turn away from our violent, addicted hearts. And understand that mercy is what's needed now. Mercy for our neighbors. Mercy for our children to not have to live in such a sullen and degraded existence as those ideologues have in mind in some cases. It's awful. We're going to take a quick break and return for a Neighbor's Choice Hour 2. Email me, hello@aneighborschoice.com. Back in just a moment, but for now, Godspeed.
Your home for news, talk, and information. 1040 WHBO Pinellas Park. Tampa Bay's all new News Talk 1040.
It's the only way I get news.
From ABC News, I'm Michelle Franzen. President Biden expected to detail a new national strategy in the fight against COVID tomorrow. That includes getting more Americans vaccinated. The White House says he's expected to urge more companies to make them mandatory. The CDC now showing 95% of counties across the U.S. reporting high community transmission rates. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki.
Increasing vaccinations will stop the spread of the pandemic. We'll get the pandemic under control. We'll return people to normal life. That's what our objective is.
But hasn't he hesitancy and pushback on vaccines and masks continue. In Colorado, Jefferson County's public health director says it stopped its mobile COVID vaccine clinics because workers were getting harassed. In California, Republican efforts to recall Governor Gavin Newsom for his handling of the pandemic are in the final stretch of the days. Vice President Kamala Harris there today to campaign.
With less than a week to go before ballots are counted in the recall election here, Gavin Newsom is bringing in the big Democrat names. Former President Obama and TV ads. Next week, President Biden will be here. Today, Vice President Kamala Harris campaigning with Newsom in her hometown of Oakland.
We are here to say today we fight for Gavin Newsom.
Millions of ballots have already been returned. Every registered voter here in California was mailed a ballot. Alex Stone, ABC News, Los Angeles.
Residents from Louisiana to New York are still recovering from Ida. 27 people died in New Jersey. Today, Governor Phil Murphy thanking first responders for saving lives and warning residents another storm is expected.
I can't even believe that we're talking about this, but here goes. We are at risk for some severe storms this evening, which could bring wind gusts and downpours into areas that need neither. Please take it safe as these storms progress.
Ida is blamed for 71 deaths across 8 states. You're listening to ABC News.
Let's see, if something costs less, but people are happier with it, that sounds like something to look into, and that's MediShare. Maybe you've heard switching to MediShare to pay for healthcare can save the typical family $500 a month, and that's huge. But it's also true that people are way more satisfied after making the switch, too. The customer satisfaction rate for MediShare is double that of the typical health insurance plan. Double. MediShare works. It's been around for more than a quarter century, and members have shared more than $3 billion of each other's bills. People love having telehealth and a huge nationwide PPO network. So, yeah, you can save a ton and like it better. Imagine being happy with how you're taking care of your health care. So if you're self-employed or part of the gig economy, or you just want a plan you're happy with, you can call right now and get a price within 2 minutes. A very, very smart use of 2 minutes. Here's the number you need. 877-26-BIBLE. That's 877-26-BIBLE. 877-26-BIBLE.
Security high in Paris as the trial for those charged in connection with the 2015 Bataclan terror attacks gets underway.
The courthouse where the trial is taking place here in Paris has been turned into a fortress. The French Interior Minister saying, quote, "The terrorist threat in France is high, especially at times like the attacks trial. I called on all the prefects to be vigilant," end quote. In total, more than 1,000 police officers will be devoted to ensuring the security of the trial. Those authorized to attend will have to go through several checkpoints. The trial is expected to last around 9 months. Inez de la Cotera, ABC News, Paris.
A holiday tradition is back. ABC's Aaron Katursky has details.
It was 2019 when marching bands last played live as they paraded through New York in the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. The virus made last year a made-for-TV thing. But this year, Macy's and the city said the parade can step in the streets once again with a nod to the new pandemic reality. There will be fewer participants in the parade, and all will be vaccinated and wear masks. Singers and dancers may go without.
Some of the world's largest broadcasters are being asked by human rights groups to cancel plans to cover next February's Winter Olympics in Beijing. In an open letter, human rights groups, which represent minorities in China, say broadcasters risk being complicit in the worsening human rights abuses in China. This is ABC News.
The pandemic's reminded us we live in a sea of airborne germs that can assault us with every breath. Your nose is the body's first line of defense by helping filter out allergens, bacteria, and viruses before they reach your lungs. So how do you clean your nose? Navage uses powered suction to flush out mucus and germs that cause congestion or worse, can make you sick. Over 2 million people use Navage to breathe better, sleep deeper, snore less, and feel healthier without drugs. Go to Navage.com or find Navage at Walgreens, CVS, Rite Aid, Bed Bath, and Target.
Michelle Franzen, ABC News.
News Talk 1040, Tampa Bay weather forecast.
Good afternoon. I'm meteorologist Alan Archer at your News Talk 1040 WHBO Weather Center, where a weak storm center in the Central Gulf moves up into the Panhandle tonight. It's affording us a 60% chance of afternoon thunder showers in from the southwest, cloudy at 89, 45% tonight at 77. Back to a cloudy 60% anytime day thunder shower tomorrow with a high of 84. Thunder showers into Friday as well. I'm meteorologist Alan Archer, News Talk 1040 WHBO.
This portion of the upcoming amazing broadcast is brought to you by the law firm of Catania & Catania, award-winning personal injury, auto, and motorcycle accident attorneys, serving Tampa Bay families for over 28 years.
The following broadcast is a paid program and does not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of Genesis Communications, its management, staff, or advertisers.
From the heart of Central Florida, you're listening to the most electrifying show in media. A Neighbor's Choice. I'm your host, your neighbor, David Gornoski. So glad to be with you again for another exciting hour of news analysis live on FM, AM, podcast, and video stream. Go to our website, aneighborschoice.com, and subscribe to our newsletter so you don't miss any of our content, some of which is online only. We've got video interviews, articles, all kinds of great content on our website at neighborschoice.com. Looking at our comment stream that you guys can be a part of, go to Rumble and search for A Neighbor's Choice. Watch us there live and join, subscribe there. My only hope, George says, is that it becomes so obvious that many people will wake up. My deep belief is that lying is deeply wrong and will fire back. The white pill. And that's true. I think we can have a renaissance, but it's not going to be easy. It's going to be a tough intellectual fight, storytelling fight. Stories are more powerful than facts and figures. We need to tell stories. Write movies, feature stories, just let people speak. Write poetry, write articles, whatever it is. Do a podcast, whatever you got to do. Tell the victim stories around us. And let's make sure we don't create a victim-obsessed society, but a liberating society where people can be set free. Another commenter says, I've been seed oil free for about a month now, and I feel absolutely fantastic. Well, that's great to hear. And I know that a lot of people are telling me they're doing this. They're listening to the show, or maybe they heard about it before, but a lot of people have heard it from the show. Get away from the vegetable oils. Get away from the chicken fat, the pork fat that are high in these vegetable oil fats. Stay away from the margarine. Stay away from processed foods. Check the labels to make sure they don't have vegetable oils. And just that one fix alone, I'm getting people telling me I've lost 20 pounds in 2 months. And it's not just about the weight loss. It's more importantly about what it's doing to your health, long-term health, getting rid of inflammation, getting rid of oxidative stress, getting rid of the hormonal havoc that those things do to us. They're not human food. They should be, banned if we're going to have a nanny state. I don't want a nanny state, but if we're going to have a nanny state, they should ban them first thing. The internet is too powerful to have ever been wieldy to a tortured public in so little time. It's like setting peasants loose to the Library of Congress. If they don't learn to read and question, they'll just burn it for warmth. That's an interesting perspective. So you're basically... is that the perspective you're saying, Patrick? Are you saying that's the perspective of the establishment, or if that's the perspective of, a freedom perspective? I'd be interested to hear you explain that a little more. Another says, David's quote from Mark Twain on Fools makes me wonder about the white pill. The white pill is the idea that things can be positive and go forward in a positive direction. Look, I am very optimistic. I believe that I'm not in charge of history. Somebody else is, and they're a master strategist, and their plan is unfolding amazingly well. And that is the stone the builders rejected. He became the cornerstone. So I believe that's what's driving history, the story of history. It's his story, and we're a part of it. And I think he wins. But how we get there, you can do it the easy way or the hard way. We tend to choose the hard way, but who knows? There's always opportunities for renaissance. The Mark Twain quote he's referring to that I said is, it's easier to fool people than to convince them that they have been fooled. Nobody wants to admit that they've been fooled. Just like Fauci, he continues to lie, but as Dr. Rand Paul says, he's referred him for an investigation by the DOJ, but the DOJ is corrupt. They're partisan. They're not going to do anything, but you can only hope. The federal government is colluding with social media companies to censor posts deemed misinformation. Who does the deeming? What exactly qualifies as misinformation? I don't think we are in America anymore. That's Conchetta, a commenter, saying that. It's interesting on social media. Jack Posobiec, who's a journalist at Human Events, says Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi in talks with Taliban for a visit in the coming weeks to discuss infrastructure projects, per U.S. official. Also discussing a small installation to defend during construction phase. China in the U.S. News says China weighing occupation of former U.S. air base at Bagram. So they're just going to go and take the bases that we left, probably all of our equipment, the dogs, everything. It's incompetence what the government of our D.C. City is all about. That reminds me of what Donald Trump tweeted out. Donald Trump Jr. tweeted out yesterday, the only thing Joe Biden built back better was the Taliban. It wasn't just Biden, it was the whole deal, the whole D.C. uniparty. They spent $2 trillion. They enriched their friends, got themselves nice jobs when they retire, very cush neighborhoods, very nice, long, large walls, big driveways, right? Long retirements. But all they got was a more powerful China, more powerful Afghanistan, ISIS. J.D. Vance, he's the author running for Senate in Ohio. He says, he's referring to this person named Ellen Barkin, one of the blue check liberals. I don't know what she is, what she does. But Ellen says, what is the expiration date for cis white males? Meaning she wants all white males to cease to exist. That's what she's been taught in her TV. And that's what she's been taught by rich six-figure university professors. J.D. Vance responds saying, pointing out that 40% of Afghans support suicide bombing as supposed racism, but welcoming the death of cis white males is progressive and brave. That's because that's part of that scapegoating mentality, that you can decide to designate a people group as subhuman, as unwanted, and you can just terrorize them, attack them, hate them, abuse them, and their children. It's disgusting. It's reprehensible, but that's what history is littered with. Awful, awful, hateful scapegoating. And that's what Jesus came to set us free. Will we follow Jesus or will we follow into chaos? That's what we have to decide in this moment. Speaking of scapegoating, here's a clip from a quote from Awakened World. It says, still thinking it's about the flu, Nigeria has announced its citizens will no longer be able to visit churches or mosques and will not have access to banking services from the second week in September without proof of vaccination. That's taking over in Nigeria. J.D. Vance commented on that saying, looking forward to a world where I can't go to church because my kid only has 7 booster shots. There's a lot of people salivating for that kind of reality, unfortunately, because they've bought in. They've decided to let TV groupthink just totally subdue their mind, to own their mind. Here's a headline from Janet Street Porter. Thinking of children as state assets may be the way forward. She says, the coronavirus has turned me into a nicer person. A year ago, I didn't say hello to total strangers when shopping or walking, preferring to keep it to myself. So now she wants to make sure, because she's a nicer person, that we should see children as state assets. That's what collectivism is all about. No independence, no creative, diverse thought. Families aren't allowed to do what they want to do. One size fits all ideas, one size fits all religion, one size fits all medicine, one size fits all money, fake money, printed out of thin air. That's what they want. That's a reprobate mind, totally owned by darkness. And it's nonsense. Speaking of nonsense, here's an old story. Well, this is from, this is actually from today, but it's referring to an old story where Joe Biden said, next Republican who tells me I'm not religious, I'll shove my rosary beads down their throat. So he's a real Christian tough guy, isn't he? Likes to go to the aid of stopping the abortions of babies. Him and the Church of Satan are fighting very hard to stop that bill in Texas. It's amazing to see people unite together. Meanwhile, F. Joe Biden chants fill the air as Americans are finally fed up. College stadiums, there's a lot of video clips circulating online virally. This is by Brandon Safri reporting this. College stadiums erupt into F. Joe Biden chants during the first weekend of college football as Americans begin to show their frustration. Hopefully it can't be directed into partisanship. It has to be directed into getting rid of this uniparty that has corrupted everything and become totally unethical. And it's a reflection of a society that has lost its ethics. Going back to that story, because I'm hitting a lot of little news bits fast here, all with the theme of reflecting on a country that needs to repent of its empire, both domestically and abroad. Darren Beatty of Revolver.news says, imagine you're a nation and you have China and globalist American empire competing for you. China agrees to do infrastructure deal on purely transactional terms. U.S. attaches conditions of women's rights, trans rights, and insists on injecting NGOs poison. The choice is obvious. And I think that's an example of what's playing out in countries all over the world. Places in Africa, Ethiopia, Afghanistan now. There was a story that apparently the, NGOs or the DC elitists, that were occupying Afghanistan, that they would put out a George Floyd mural. And that's what the Taliban, they painted over that mural fast. But it's like they want to impose their, politically correct religious, and I think it's a tragedy that George Floyd died, but they've turned it into this kind of perversion and a kind of, exploitation by giant corporations to try to act like they're, concerned with the plight of justice, even though they've done nothing to set any nonviolent prisoners free under Biden. They don't care. They'd rather paint a mural for George Floyd in Afghanistan, and the Taliban painted over it as soon as they could. But they don't want to be imposed upon. But the DC elitists that were imposing on them and imposing on our lives, they don't seem to care. They have this imperialist mindset that you've got to like their religious causes, you've got to like their coercive methods, and there's nothing you can do about it. It's our way or the highway. Those ideologies don't end well. Jacobins, whatever this stuff is, they don't end well. So it's a interesting time to see it. Amy Therese says, she's an online commenter, she says, BLM doesn't speak for black people. LGBTQIA plus activists don't speak for a community. Gender ideology isn't a community, and neither is skin color. Progressive identity discourse is just weaponized emotional manipulation in service of corporations and the surveillance state. Now, that's someone I think who's on the left there. But she points out a very important point. That those things, I call the social justice stuff the jailer of the people's justice, because they do nothing to stop unjust wars. It was the McWoke crowd that was circling the wagons protecting Biden for bungling the Afghanistan withdrawal. It was them that were saying, some of them were saying to go back in and keep occupying them some more to get some more people rich. So they could get that mural back. So that just a few more years and they'll like the mural, folks. That's what they were thinking. A stupid Ponzi scheme. It's the McWoke left that said, hey, we got to get Biden in here, and he's done nothing but, lock away the people for nonviolent crimes, throw away the key, do nothing for people in the midst of a pandemic where they can't have proper hygiene. They're eating seed oil sludge in there. Imagine being in there for a first-time nonviolent crime for some nanny state law, and you are forced to eat seed oil inflammatory foods every day and get no sunshine, and then you're packed into places without proper hygiene and distancing and all that. That's torture. The left does nothing for that. I speak out about it. They don't speak out. They shut their mouths and wait for the CNN to tell them somebody to hate today. That's what they do. It's pathetic. It's embarrassing. Patrick, a commenter, said, forgive me, what I mean is that given how starved we've been of true education, community spirit, and respectable authority for so long, it's no wonder we didn't immediately turn this incredible tool, meaning the internet, against the corporate class. The internet reflects the worst of our traits that our leaders have been cultivating for arguably over 100 years. If we can learn to wield the internet, use it to strengthen our communal ties, and ignore the baubles and deviations that it offers, we can win. That is, if they don't shut it off next week. So, I mean, raise some good points. Raise some good points. Let's take a quick break. We're speaking live on A Neighbor's Choice up next in just a moment. Not just, we'll hear from Tucker Goodrich, but in the meantime, we'll answer more of your, or read more of your questions or comments. And you can call in too if you want to, 727-587-1040. David Gronowski here. Let me tell you about a man named Gabriel. Every day, Gabriel puts on his boots and drives across America to make sure our store shelves stay stocked with the food people count on. See, Gabriel served our country overseas. He knows that America stands for freedom, quality, and caring for others the way we would like to be treated. That's why when Gabriel saw food shelves getting low during the pandemic, he hit the road as a driver with Oakley Transport. In the land of the free, where no one should go hungry, we need heroes like Gabriel to help keep America fed. CDLA driving professionals. Join Oakley Transport today. Keep America fed. Visit oakleytransport.com or call them today at 1-877-8-TANKER. That's 1-877-8-TANKER.
A lawsuit is not something that anyone looks forward to. It's a stressful process. There are attorneys in Tampa Bay that keep clients well informed, creating less stress. That law firm is Catania. Personal injury law is defended with full disclosure. There is no guessing game. If it's an auto accident, medical malpractice, nursing home negligence, unsafe working conditions, or motorcycle accidents, the law firm of Catania will handle the process worry-free from start to finish. Many victims don't realize they have a claim for the loss until they talk to Catania. They only represent private individuals and treat every case as if it's going to trial. Putting families first is more than just a slogan. It's their way of practicing law. It's a commitment to you. Remember, they don't get paid if you don't get paid. So go to Catania.com. Over 28 years in practice. Catania, personal injury, auto, and motorcycle accident attorneys. Catania, putting families first.
Office Tampa.
Not attorney spokeswoman.
Something I wonder about sometimes is, will the generation that are the babies now, they're babies, toddlers, when they're in their middle age, when they're 40s or 50s, will they still do the same nonsense that the failed bureaucrats in DC and other governments around the world are doing now? Will they learn from this moment? I keep hoping they'll be the Luke Skywalker generation, And I know that's kind of silly, right? Like no generation is just one way, good guys or whatever. But I really hope that the spirit of the generation that right now is having to be subjected to such fear-mongering and nonsense and intrusiveness and hate disguised as some bastardized version of love, I hope and pray. And I won't sit and just passively pray, but actively pray by my actions, that we can help bring in a renaissance such that the kids who are babies and so forth now will become a Luke Skywalker generation and throw off the yoke of this tyrannical nonsense that the Davos crowd and everybody wants. I surely hope so. Do you think so? The easy answer I hear most of the time is, oh, the ones who are wearing masks now, they're just going to be droned out. And I'm sure some of them will. Some said to me, they're going to think it's part of their body. By the time they're 30 or 40, they'll wear a mask all the time. It'll be like it's a part of their body. Like, I guess how someone would wear a necklace or something. It's just the mask is part of their everyday routine. And I think that would be the case for some people. But I hope and pray that the spirit of liberty will come back. They say things are like generational pendulums, and I sure hope that's at play here. I sure hope that the world is not going to go into a long spell of darkness where everybody's got to be, pushed into some stupid cookie cutter, group identity nonsense. It's so disgusting. And it's so hard to get people to get out of it because it feels so good to be hateful, apparently. Especially when they're told by all the gaslighting media that the hate they feel is righteous and holy. It's awful. It's a cult, the way they've created this. McWoke justice. They don't care about the people left in prison. You don't hear them saying a word about what Biden's done to do nothing. I speak out, and I spoke out under Trump. But they don't care. They're just, But will we raise up a generation of all these people discovering homeschooling and alternative schooling and the internet? Will we learn? Will we have a renaissance? Can a whole generation get off of seed oils in time to not screw up their heads and some of the things that those things are doing to us in the science that we've looked at? I hope and pray so. Glenn Greenwald is a true journalist. He's on the left. He says, another day, another liberal. This one, a Media Matters alum, stating explicitly that rejection of liberal ideology means a person is so stupid, primitive, and morally repugnant that death is a just punishment for them, or at least a punishment that we should all celebrate. And he's referring to a quote from Oliver Willis, who says, these are people who mock us relentlessly for doing the things that have made this society better. They're paying a price for that stupid attitude for once, and it's a effing lesson that needs to be pounded into their stupid heads and wanting people to suffer. They don't agree with him. Meanwhile, on the other side, you have folks like Clint Russell of Liberty Lockdown. I've had him on the show talking about how there's a problem which leads to a solution, which leads to totalitarianism. He talks about 9/11 leads to the Patriot Act, TSA, NSA, war. Global financial crisis leads to Dodd-Frank. COVID leads to lockdowns, mandates, and CBDC. Every single one of these problems was created by government and resulted in more government. That is not an accident. You are on a rat's wheel to hell. That's how a lot of people feel. But we don't have to go on that rat wheel to hell. We have free will. We have agency. We can fight for what's right. We can fight for love and nonviolence. We don't have to go down to this pathway of ugliness. Aaron Macias, a commenter on our live stream, says the original progressives were evangelical Protestants. There has always been a religious zeal that has guided progressive thinking. They've simply removed Jesus from the equation. Very well said. Very well said. Progressivism is a mutation. It's a heretical mutation of Christianity. And this woke version is the nastiest, late stage version of this mutation that I've ever seen. And I think it's because they're nasty because they know they're out of power. Culturally, they've overstayed their relevance. They're a has-been ideology. And I do believe that the future is wide open for liberty to take back its place in the hearts and minds of people. But liberty must come with virtue. Not this libertinism, this do what you want to do what thou wilt, that nonsense. No, liberty with love and mercy guiding it. That's the wisdom that we need. Up next, we'll hear from Tucker Goodrich. So ask your questions about seed oils and vegetable oils and health-related questions. We'll be back with Tucker Goodrich. Wonderful, wonderful person. Stay with us.
Hi, this is Gordon Deal. Join me weekdays for This Morning, America's First News. Hear the stories you'll be talking about and searching for all day as we go beyond the headlines and above the chatter with your first look at breaking news, money, Washington politics, technology, entertainment, entrepreneurship, and sports. we explain why stories matter.
The news and information you need to know. Weekday morning 6 to 8 with Gordon Deal on News Talk 1040 WHBO.
A Florida judge lifted a stay on Governor Ron DeSantis' ban on school mask mandates while an appeals court looks into it. New York Governor Kathy Hochul's pushing for adolescents to get COVID-19 vaccines as the school year begins.
Of the pool of people who could be vaccinated in this age group, we only have the job halfway done.
President Biden tomorrow will outline his 6-step plan to stop the spread of the Delta variant. 3 people are behind bars charged with stealing the identities of victims from a deadly condo collapse in Florida.
Cyber grave robbers did move very quickly after the collapse to grab what they could from deceased victims, while families and friends were in absolute emotional turmoil.
Miami-Dade County State's Attorney Catherine Fernandez-Rundle. Tropical storm warnings are posted for part of the Florida Panhandle with Tropical Storm Mindy in the Gulf of Mexico. Stocks closed lower following a Fed report that showed the economy slowed this summer. Daria Albinger, ABC News.
News Talk 1040 Tampa Bay weather forecast.
Good afternoon. I'm meteorologist Alan Archer at your News Talk 1040 WHBO Weather Center, where a weak storm center in the Central Gulf moves up into the Panhandle tonight. It's affording us a 60% chance of afternoon thunder showers in from the southwest, cloudy at 89, 45% tonight at 77, back to a cloudy 60% anytime day thunder shower tomorrow at the high at 84. Thunder showers into Friday as well. I'm meteorologist Alan Archer, News Talk 1040 WHBO.
David Gronowski here. Let me tell you about a man named Gabriel. Every day, Gabriel puts on his boots and drives across America to make sure our store shelves stay stocked with the food people count on. See, Gabriel served our country overseas. He knows that America stands for freedom, quality, and caring for others the way we would like to be treated. That's why when Gabriel saw food shelves getting low during the pandemic, he hit the road as a driver with Oakley Transport. In the land of the free, where no one should go hungry, we need heroes like Gabriel to help keep America fed. CDLA driving professionals. Join Oakley Transport today. Keep America fed. Visit oakleytransport.com or call them today at 1-877-8-TANKER. That's 1-877-8-TANKER. A Neighbor's Choice returns. I'm David Gronowski, and we are live on radio, podcast, and video stream. Our website, aneighborschoice.com. Tomorrow we'll be doing our first little small group discussion. We're going to try it out, just a little maiden voyage with just a few people to see how the format goes, and then see maybe broadening it out to more people, or perhaps doing different topics. We'll just figure out the format as we go and see what people like. But we're going to do our anthropological question and answer on Zoom tomorrow at 11 a.m. Eastern time. Well, that's September 9th, Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern time. If you want to be a part of that, email us hello@aneighborschoice.com. That's hello@aneighborschoice.com for the invitation details. And joining me now, sounds like a snake was in there with him, is our friend Tucker Goodrich. How you doing, Tucker?
A snake was in there with me? Wait a minute, what?
I thought I heard a hissing noise. Maybe it was just a breathing or something. How you doing?
Oh, yeah, that was probably just me mucking around with my computer setup. So I'm doing well, David. How are you?
I'm doing great. So it's great having you back on. And, you wanted to, I guess, touch on some of the autoimmune disorder things that are going on? We talked about it a little bit last week, I believe. Anything you wanted to kind of add to what we talked about or reiterate?
Yeah, I just, I think this is a very important point that's not often, you see a lot of papers where they observe that the rate of autoimmunity has gone up, and there's really no explanation as to why this has happened. I mean, there's something called the hygiene hypothesis, where the idea is that, so for instance, kids who grow up in farms are less likely to get asthma than kids who grow up in cities. So basically the idea is that by, having a dog or a cow in your life, you get exposed to all sorts of microbes, and that these have a beneficial effect on your immune system, sort of like, forcing your immune system to go lift weights so it's stronger and better able to handle these things. That's interesting, but it doesn't really explain why even why even kids who grow up on farms, they're not immune to autoimmune disease. They're just less likely to have it. And, it's super important for somebody who's, as I've learned now being married to somebody with a chronic autoimmune disease, to have some idea what to do. And the dietary stuff that I've done for myself and for my family and my loved ones seems to have had a real effect, and, has no downside. So I think it's something that people really need to be aware of.
So asthma, that's an autoimmune disorder that's caused by what? Do we know the mechanisms of what's causing this?
Well, asthma is a really good one, because the animal models show that asthma is caused by breakdown products of linoleic acid. Seed oils, in other words. I grew up with asthma, had asthma most of my adult life. I haven't had an asthma attack since I fixed my diet. And I do all the things that I used to do. I still go outside and do a lot more running now than I used to, because I would have what they call exercise-induced asthma, where you go out and run in cold weather and you have these massive asthma attacks that used to be quite alarming to my friend at first, because he was sure I was about to die. But, now it's just not an issue. It just never happens. So that's one. Asthma is one of the clearer cases where in the animal models it seemed to be directly linked to seed oil intake.
I see.
Right? And maybe that the reason they see farm kids are getting less of it is because farm kids tend to eat more milk from the farm and get less seed oils.
So, I want to, anecdotally, I've noticed, and I want to ask you your take on this, that it seems like the baby boomer generation, by and large, is aging with aging-related diseases kind of happening a little bit faster on their chronology of their age than their parents, the silent generation or the greatest generation. They didn't seem to age at the rate that boomers are aging. Is that because the silent generation and the greatest generation did not eat seed oils as often as early on in life because of the market of how it worked out?
It's not a little bit faster. It's a lot faster. And it's important for people to understand, what we call type 2 diabetes used to be known as adult onset diabetes, right? That was the term that was used in medicine, because you saw it happening to people when they were adults, and they had to rename it when all of a sudden all of these kids started getting quote unquote adult onset diabetes. And now type 2 diabetes is an enormous problem in children. So it's actually been a huge change in aging-related diseases, and a lot of these chronic diseases really are aging-related diseases, right? So things like ACL tears, which used to be rare, have become unbelievably common. The ACL tear wasn't even known to medicine before the 1960s, okay? Everybody knows somebody who's torn their ACL nowadays. So what has changed that's making us so much sicker and so much more frail? I mean, obviously I have my opinion, but the fact that it's happened is without question. Now, I know, just to kind of change gears here a little bit, we are going to be interviewing a scientist by the name of Amir Taha at the end of the month, which I'm super excited about. And I've been doing a little bit more reading on his research. And I came across a paper that he wrote called Linoleic Acid, Good or Bad for the Brain. And he points out that, everybody knows that you're supposed to breastfeed because it's good for kids and it's better than bottle feeding. Well, he writes in this paper, the amount of seed oils in mother's breast milk was associated with a reduced IQ at 5 to 6 years of age, and that children whose mothers had the highest levels of seed oils in their breast milk had cognitive scores comparable to children who were never breastfed. So it seems that and we've discussed this with Bruce German in the past on the podcast, who made the same point that linoleic acid goes straight through breast milk, basically into the baby, and it appears to be having a negative effect on our children's intelligence and their ability to develop their cognitive skills as they're growing up. That's horrifying.
Yeah, that is horrifying. So is that, and how is that because the mothers are eating vegetable oils at the time that they're breastfeeding, or could it be high levels of this linoleic acid found in vegetable oils in the mother's milk, even if they had stopped eating all of this vegetable oil type food and stopped it for a while before they had?
Well, that's really a great question. And what you're asking is how much of it that's stored in fat tissue is going to be released into the breast milk as the mother's making breast milk. Right. And unfortunately, we really don't know the answer to that. But, certainly if you're a mother and you're concerned about your kids' development growing up, you really want to think hard about what you're eating. I mean, mothers do already, but they just haven't really been told this particular part of the message. And there's, a lot of literature looking at breast milk from different societies, including societies that don't eat any seed oils at all. And the seed oil component of the breast milk is dramatically lower in those populations. So we know that what you eat can have an effect on it. Is it released from stored fat, and does it go into the breast milk? I don't really know, but it still kind of gets you to the same place that you should take the precaution and reduce the intake in your diet.
Right. Yeah, it's a scary thing trying to keep up with all the different ways this stuff apparently is affecting people. It kind of reminds me of what, we've heard about, and I think we may have touched on it before, but just for those who didn't hear it, childhood obesity spiked amid COVID-19 lockdowns. The study shows, and National Review reports on this, that number of American children who are overweight or obese has surged by a relative increase of almost 24% since the COVID-19 pandemic began, according to a new study by the University of Michigan and Kaiser, Southern California, found that children gained excess weight during the pandemic, particularly children aged 5 to 11. 36.2% of children in that age group were overweight or obese between March 2019 and January 2020. That figure rose to 45.7% between March 2020 and January 2021. So that's an absolute.
And those are unbelievable numbers when you consider that 100 years ago obesity was rare.
Right. So that's all seed oils and sugars driving that. Right.
I can't think of any other explanation for it. I mean,
I'm sure it's all that red meat that the kids are. It's all the red meat kids are eating, man. That's what it's all about. Remember, haven't you heard
Exactly. We'll
Clean
just
New
ignore
Deal?
we'll just ignore the fact that the amount of red meat we've been eating has been going down. And, it's quite amazing how sick our kids are, and how, it's just amazing. We've had diet experts telling us what to eat for decades and generations, really, at this point, and we keep getting sicker and sicker, and they keep telling us the problem is we're not doing it right. We're not, when they introduced the dietary guidelines, they had no evidence that they were going to make us healthy, right? And they still don't have any evidence that they're going to make us healthy, and they still keep coming out with studies. I mean, the latest is this study from Harvard that just came out in the last week, where they say, oh, okay, well, if you eat more linoleic acid, it's going to lower your risk of type 2 diabetes. And I look at that, and then I look at the fact that seed oil consumption has skyrocketed over the last century, as has diabetes. And I would like to ask them, where is the evidence that this massive increase that we've seen in seed oil consumption has lowered our likelihood as a country to get type 2 diabetes? Because both numbers are going up in lockstep.
So Harvard came out and said the linoleic acid is reducing likelihood of type 2 diabetes. How do they even come up with this?
I don't know. It's a big study. I haven't had a chance to look at it yet. But, I would really like to see the sensible reconciliation that a scientist ought to do looking at this field. Say, well, it's odd. We say that it's good for type 2 diabetes, but if you go around the world and look at all of the populations who don't get type 2 diabetes, what do they all have in common? None of them eat seed oils.
Right.
And the only, primitive group that we know of that seemed to have diabetes were the ones who ate lots of nuts and got lots of omega-6 fats. And this is the Bushmen in Africa, where they ate a lot of nuts. It was a huge part of their diet, and they got a lot of omega-6 via that way. So the only primitive group that we know of that had a risk for type 2 diabetes was also the only one that was eating a lot of seed oils. And yet,
Go ahead.
It just blows the mind that they can even make this argument with a straight face.
We're speaking with Tucker Goodrich. We're going to take a quick break and get back with more health, nutrition, news, and analysis. You can also visit Tucker at his blog, yelling-stop.blogspot.com. The Neighbor's Choice will continue. Who is your neighbor? Dave and Wally are team drivers for Oakley Transport. One day, they came across a very serious accident on the highway. Some might pass on by, but Dave and Wally saw there was no time to waste. They jumped into action and saved 2 people's lives with moments to spare. That's the kind of courageous love we need more of today. It reflects the respected culture Oakley Transport develops with their driving professionals. CDLA licensed drivers. Join Oakley Transport today for a rewarding career. Visit oakleytransport.com. That's oakleytransport.com.
A lawsuit is not something that anyone looks forward to. It's a stressful process. There are attorneys in Tampa Bay that keep clients well informed, creating less stress. That law firm is Catania. Personal injury law is definitive with full disclosure. There is no guessing game. If it's an auto accident, medical malpractice, nursing home negligence, unsafe working conditions, or motorcycle accidents, the law firm of Catania will handle the process worry-free from start to finish. Many victims don't realize they have a claim for the loss until they talk to Catania. They only represent private individuals and treat every case as if it's going to trial. Putting families first is more than just a slogan. It's their way of practicing law. It's a commitment to you. Remember, they don't get paid if you don't get paid. So go to Catania.com. Over 28 years in practice. Catania, personal injury, auto, and motorcycle accident attorneys. Catania, putting families first.
Office Tampa.
Not attorney spokeswoman.
Neighbor's Choice returns. I'm your host, David Granosky, here with my friend Tucker Goodrich, looking at nutrition, looking at why we need to get away from vegetable oils, also known as seed oils. We are live. We've got a comment stream going on. Look at some of these comments coming in. Scott asked, Tucker, can you recommend a good, accessible source to refer folks to who've never been exposed to the truth about seed oil? What's the best red pill in your opinion?
Oh, the best red pill would probably be one of the paleo diet books. Mark Sisson's The Primal Blueprint is something I'm really fond of. He's a straight shooter, a guy who's been very successful at fixing his own health and lots of other people's. And then he's went on and started a food company called Primal Blueprint to make these foods available to people. And I'm a customer of his food companies, which has since been bought by Kraft. And it's actually good to know that the big food companies are interested in making healthier foods available to us. The other one is a book called The Perfect Health Diet. And that's by a guy named Paul Jaminet, Jaminet. Those are two of my favorite books. They're both about 10 years old, but, truth doesn't really change over time.
And they get into the seed oil topic in those books?
Absolutely.
Yeah, very interesting.
That's absolutely.
So, and then you got to look out for Tucker's book. That's going to be a big one, huh?
Yes. Well, I'll be recommending that as soon as I get it out the door.
We get a lot of questions about all these other little tweener oils, the ones that are in between. You don't know if they're good or bad. One of the things we've heard about is peanut oil. That's said to be good in some cases, but apparently that wouldn't be the case in terms of the fried form that people see it in the restaurants, right? Peanut oil fried this or that.
Well, peanut oil is actually, from what I've seen, one of the worst. And certainly any of these oils, when you fry them, you make them worse. I mean, even Harvard agrees that frying these seed oils makes them very unhealthy. So yeah, I would avoid, basically any fried food unless you can get it fried in something healthy, which basically means, other than Buffalo Wild Wings, who fries their chicken wings in tallow, I'm not aware of really anybody who uses healthy fats to fry their foods in. Industry is making a big push to get rid of the harmful fats in seed oils. And one of the reasons is that they recognize how harmful frying food is. So, but unfortunately, when you go into the door of a restaurant, it's just about impossible to know what they're actually cooking the food in.
How come industry knows more about the harmful effects of seed oils than apparently Harvard does in some cases? That's pretty sad.
Well, industry and Harvard both agree that, frying foods in high omega-6 seed oils is bad for you. So there's not even much dispute on that point, which I always find a little bit mystifying.
I have a question for you from a market,
Sure, shoot.
From an economic standpoint. When I look at some of those packaged goods in the grocery store, in between the outer rim where I typically stay, but when you look inside some of the packaged goods, you notice that there's a lot of palm oil. Now, you've said palm oil is a higher saturated fat oil, and maybe there's some problems, and I haven't been able to sort out exactly all the takeaway points from it. But I was wondering if the industry was to say, hey, man, I think we've all heard A Neighbor's Choice. We've all heard Tucker Goodrich. We've all heard all these voices, Kate Shanahan and so forth, Chris Kenobi. Now it's mainstream. Everybody wants these toxic oils out of our foods ASAP. Could the industry turn on a dime and say, you know what, let's just add a little bit more palm oil into the Oreos and get rid of that little drop of soybean oil we added to it? Could they economically, without having to jump their prices, increase their costs? Could they absorb a quick change in a theoretical way, that if they was like, man, we've got to make a change fast so they don't ban these things or something?
No, it's impossible. I mean, for starters, the amount of, I think 80% of the fats sold in the United States now are soybean oil. And, to palm oil only comes from a limited amount of places in the world where it can be grown. So you'd have to basically go in and clear cut all of that, even to make a dent in the consumption of soybean oil. That's a real problem. I mean, we need, industries to be commended for recognizing the problems with these fats and doing what they can do to make it better. But, it's a real issue that we've gotten ourselves so hooked on this stuff over the last 100 years. And
well, let's take
it's
these
not
big.
going to be easy to fix. We need to fix it.
Yeah, let's take these big brands. You've got candy bars, you got M&Ms, you got ice creams, you got Oreo cookies. Could they all just switch over to butter? Would it be, again, they couldn't get enough butter, it would drive up their prices? Obviously you can't do abrupt change when you have a giant brand product, but I'm just trying to understand the actual logical feasibility of them trying to get these toxic waste products out of their products so that everybody can eat butter Oreos instead of soybean oil.
Yeah, I saw today that butter is on average 4 to 5 times as expensive as seed oils.
Yeah.
So
if you want to see Americans finally have the spirit of liberty in the streets, make their Oreos 4 times more expensive. All right.
Yeah, exactly.
Goodness gracious.
Exactly.
It'd be the Arab Spring all over again. My goodness. So
exactly.
So
we have people lining up at the stores, shortages, right, from not being able to produce all of our junk food. It'd be a major crisis.
So
of course,
apparently,
we probably all get thin real quick, but
apparently, Tucker, it would be very hard, in other words, to salvage some of the big industrial brands of snacks and junk that Americans are so used to. Even if they wanted to, they really couldn't transition over to healthy fats based on the economic model of what people expect from these products, right?
Yeah, I mean they've been at it for a couple of decades now, right? So it's not for lack of trying. And I think if industry could, wave a magic wand and get these fats down to a lower level tomorrow, they would certainly do it.
Really?
But, we're going to need some kind of a breakthrough product or process rather than, trying to genetically modify plants and breed better plants with healthier fats, which is what they've been doing. If we did have a breakthrough process that, that could scale up and produce this, that would be something that a lot of companies would really be on board with doing. Right?
If the industries are wanting to get away from the linoleic acid, how come they fund universities like Harvard putting out all this information saying linoleic acid is so good for you? That's what I'm.
Well, in my opinion, for the same reason Philip Morris was, if you're a company and you sell off a harmful product, you still have a liability for it, right? The guys who fund Harvard used to make seed oils. Now they make junk food that includes seed oils. So they've still got to get this seed oils is healthy message out to you.
So they know it's wrong, but they're playing multiple angles. They've got strategy 1 is keep telling everybody, hey, look, they're really good for you. Strategy 2 is, yeah, we know they're bad for you, but we got to slowly try to figure out how to get away from them.
Yeah, and it's funny because they used to put ads out saying explicitly that these things were healthy for you, and you really don't see that anymore from the product manufacturers.
Right. Well, again, Tucker, it's always great hearing from you, and you're very informative. Thanks for joining us.
Likewise, David. Thank you for having me on.
And check out his blog, yelling-stop.blogspot.com. That's it for A Neighbor's Choice. Email me, hello@aneighborschoice.com. I'm David Gronowski. Godspeed.